Hello everybody, this is Snarist, and welcome back to my Dead Space 2 Zealot difficulty walkthrough. This is chapter 4, and this is one of my favourite chapters, because it's also one of my favourite settings. I really like the Church of Unitology. I think the architecture is really fantastic. I think all the lore is super fantastic as well, especially all the, you got those little signs standing around, you can actually go up to them and listen to them. Now, that's one thing I will say that I enjoyed about Dead Space Remake a lot. It's putting a bit more emphasis on the church, because it's also made clear, well, not really made clear, but it alludes to a part of Dead Space lore that doesn't really get touched on, and it's the fact that Isaac just comes from a pretty middle-of-the-road family, but he was like an engineering prodigy and genius, so much so that he tried to get into a top school, but after his father died or disappeared or something on some sort of mining operation or some sort of space station, him and his mum were left alone, and she succumbed to grief. And to help cope with her grief, she was recruited by the Church of Unitology, so she put tons of money into it, including Isaac's tuition. So he had to settle for a sort of average, middle-of-the-road kind of university, I think. So he still got a good job and everything and still did well for himself, but he didn't get as much as he should have been promised. And that's why he has a lot of contempt for the church, because they preyed upon his mother, who was already going through a rough time. And so a lot of this chapter, there's going to be a lot of looting and going back and forth to this bench and this store here. And I'm going to be working on building my stasis module up as high as I can get it. And speaking of which, about the Dead Space remake, this may come as a bit of a shock, but as big of a fan of Dead Space as I am, not necessarily the first game, but just as the franchise as a whole, I got to make it clear that I do like a lot of aspects about the Dead Space remake, and I can name quite a few things that it did better than the original. But for the most part, I do not like the Dead Space remake all that much compared to most. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is to do with gameplay, and also part of it is to do with its story. Like, it's still the same story, but while there are a couple of plot points that I preferred over the original, for the most part, I don't like a lot of the characterizations and stuff, and I just found the remake to be overall inferior. And if you remember a while ago, there was that whole stink about the bathroom signs in the Dead Space remake, the gender-neutral bathroom thing. If you're not quite sure what that is, there's a bit of a controversy where people noticed that what used to be male and female bathroom signs on the space station of the Ishimura, it said gender neutral, meaning, either or could be used. And it definitely is a case, vaguely, of DEI and wokeness, so as far as my stance on this is concerned, I do agree more with the people that noticed it and didn't really approve of it. And I'll come back to that thought in a second, but down here, you'll have one of these injectors up top, one of these injectors down below. You'll want to take them out as quickly as you can, but there'll be a couple of slashes that are already in play, and they're going to come for you as you're taking out these guys. But if you're quick enough, you can deal with them, no problem. This is quite a tough sequence, so as soon as you kill all three of the injectors, I'd recommend just running back up the stairs if you can. Because as long as you're not looking at them, I think they won't charge you, unless they're already mid-animation and doing it. So you can get away from them quite easily. But yeah, I'm more on the side of, I noticed the signs as well, and I rolled my eyes, not because I thought it was a ridiculous controversy, but because I was just sick of seeing stuff like this in just about every game. It didn't need to exist, it exists there to be subtle propaganda, it really was. And you got to ask yourself, like, isn't it curious that the people that pointed it out were angry, but not angrier than the people towards those that have pointed it out? Like, obviously, the people that pointed it out were upset, but the most upset people by all this whole thing were the ones that were getting upset at the ones that pointed it out. It's like, if it really isn't that big of a deal, if it isn't something worth getting worried about, then why are you being that angry towards people that pointed it out? Just ignore them, or don't, make a big deal out of it. But you did. You kicked up a big stink about it. You tried to make jokes out of it, but it didn't work. Because the joke was already on you. You fell for it. So by the way, this is another, this is a fuse that you can break, so you can go back through and you can find your way to the store. Now I made a mistake because there's actually stairs to the left, but the lighting is so obscure that I felt like I was going crazy and going around in circles. I had no idea what I was doing. But there was actually a staircase that's just a little bit hidden in the dark to my right. So yeah, there's that whole controversy and all that. But what I find more baffling about these people that, you know, defend the game and everything is that a lot of them played the Dead Space remake and they thought that the game was like either better than the original or that the game itself was already fine. And to that I say, you either have incredibly low standards, you are a fake fan of Dead Space, or this is your first time playing and you've never played Dead Space, or you've played Dead Space and you liked it a lot but you can't really remember much of it because it's been that long. You know, there's a number of reasons for it, but you know, all I gotta say is, if it really did mean that much to you, if the Dead Space remake really was a fantastic game and you loved it and you loved the story and you want to see more of Isaac, you want to see more of the story, and you know it was a masterpiece and it was your favorite game, you know, one of your favorite games in a long time, then if that's the case, then why don't you go out of your way to go and play Dead Space 2 and then Dead Space 3? You know, if you're a fan now, or you care a lot about the story, you know, saying like, oh, the story was amazing, the characters were amazing, the writing was so good, it's like, yeah, things get, well, apart from maybe Dead Space 3, things still get better towards into 2, because 2 is an amazing game, and everyone would tell you that, and everyone is telling these YouTubers, hey, you've never played Dead Space 2 before, play Dead Space 2, it's absolutely worth it, it's a fantastic game, and they don't fucking do it. And it just buys into why I don't really trust a lot of YouTubers with many opinions. It's like, you know, it's just another game to them. They'll say like, oh yeah, I love the game, it's amazing, it's a masterpiece, 10 out of 10. But they can't say that it was shit, or that they can't have a complicated opinion about it, because if they do, people get put off by that because they just want nothing but positivity. They want nothing but positivity, and they're worried that if they even have a remotely controversial opinion, it's going to turn a lot of people away, because unfortunately, the vast majority of a lot of these big YouTubers' audiences are filled with normies who don't care about games, who don't care about the legacy of games. They just want more and more slop served to themselves. So that's a bit of a rant there, just to fill in the video. As soon as you come out of here, Ghost Nicole, I'll call her, is trying to stab you, so mash your way out of it. You have to mash for quite a long time, surprisingly. But there is a node in here, so go ahead and collect that. And then make your way back out, stop by the store and the bench if you have to. And I didn't mean for it to turn into a bit of a rant video, but yeah, the Dead Space remake did so many problems, and you know, at this point I find it hilarious that I can calmly talk about what I don't like about it, but then everyone else just starts losing their minds, you know, saying like, how could you not like it, or how could you have that opinion, and blah blah blah. And there's another room in these hallways that's like a conduit room, and I think if you're signed on with an EA account, or you know the EA servers are running, which, you know, obviously right now for this game they're not, they never have been for a long time, but yeah, there are some conduit rooms in this game that you can access, but I don't think anyone can get into them now because they just usually have like a whole bunch of other supplies. You don't really need them though. I think this is where I finally solved the mystery, or I'm about to, and I realise that, you know, I'm doing it wrong, and so I think I'll use my locator, and I run into a necromorph by accident, and you can change the locator to go from objective to store to bench to save station. You can change different things. I'm pretty sure soon I'll get sick of it and just start using the locator, because clearly something's going on here and the video's going on for longer than it needs to. Although I'll tell you what, even though there's a lot to say about chapter 6 and 7, because you know there's a fair bit that goes on in them that you need to look out for, because that's when the game really starts ramping up the difficulty, especially chapter 7. In fact, I'm going to mention it in my hardcore difficulty walkthrough that chapter 7's a pretty good place to save if you're not confident enough to go through and, you know, try to conquer as many chapters as you can before you save. And that's where I realised the mistake, because it's that obscured in darkness in this part of the church that, you know, you forget there's a staircase to your left. But yeah, chapter 6 and 7 are some of the longest chapters in the game. So hopefully I'll have a bunch to talk about now, but I think for the night that it is right now, and I'm still doing recording, if chapter 5 isn't that long, I might just wrap up that, and that'll be it for me for the night. I've done pretty well so far. That's the problem when you work all day, your work is like hard labour, and you come back and you do this. There's a combination between wanting to play games, make videos, just chill out, relax, maybe have something to eat, and then just, being so exhausted you just want to collapse and fall asleep. Because I've got quite a weird sleep schedule compared to a lot of my family. So anyway, we just bought a security suit, so it gives us another 5% of armor, so we're now at 10% armor, and it also gives us a higher capacity of inventory, so we can hold more stuff. It's going to be good. See, what I'm doing right now is I'm making sure that whenever I find stasis modules, because you already recharge it pretty quickly, and it's only in a couple of counters that you need to spam stasis just to be safe, or if you need to use it in a panic, I've already got 4 uses out of it. So during cutscenes or during slower moments, it'll charge up on its own, and that's something I like about the stasis as well, because all the cutscenes in this game are in-engine, meaning you could be empty of stasis, go into a long cutscene, and your stasis will start charging up naturally. It's really well done. I like it a lot. But yeah, going forward, if we ever pick up stasis modules, I make sure that I keep it in storage, because you only need about 2 stacks of 3 of stasis, just in case. But, that's at most. I think I have like 3 by the end of the game. The rest of them that I find, I just sell, because stasis stacks that you find in the world, on the station, that you collect and you don't need to use, you'll find that they're worth a lot of money. So that's the room where Ghost Nicole tried to attack us. We're going to move on through, and I'm pretty sure the next encounter is going to be our first Stalker encounter. Yes, it is. So the Stalkers on this version of the game, which, again, I'm used to playing on a PS3 or Xbox 360 that hasn't been properly updated, so the Stalkers wait until you get right into their midst, into their clutches, before they start attacking. Now, I make a mistake here, because this is the first time I've encountered them on this version of the game on PC, so, you'll see me going back and forth a little bit, just trying to bait them, but they don't take the bait, and I'm wondering what the hell's going on. And then I go into the middle of it, and just like my worst fears have been realised, the gates drop down, and then they all start making their movements. What I should have been doing is I should have been staying completely still. See, I just got rammed in the back right there. And I'm almost dead. Very fortunate. So, if you can, make it back here, and you'll be safe. You just got to wait for them to pop their head around the corner, and they'll do it for a couple of seconds, and then one at a time they'll make that weird screeching sound, and they'll come charging at you. Be careful when they become crawlers, because they crawl very, very fast, and they move really weird, so you might end up missing a couple of shots. You can pick up their claws and fire them at them to knock them over. It's definitely a viable strategy. Now, if you don't want to take any hits like I did, what you can do is you can stand perfectly still in the middle and use your camera to look around. And as soon as you see the first of these stalkers that poke their head around the corner, then make sure you aim in their direction, but don't do anything. Wait for them to come charging out around the corner and screeching, hit them with stasis, and then try to run back to this position where I'm at now, or kill them and then slowly back up. Get ready by backing up slowly towards these stairs, and if you have to, use a stasis on the ground so that by the time they charge you, they'll get caught up in it before they get to you, but then you need to start sprinting away, because if they can get caught in that close enough to you, they'll hit you still, because, well, they don't slow down really, they're just... they do slow down, but their momentum hasn't slowed down, meaning they can still hit you if they make contact. So that makes it pretty simple. It's not the only Stalker encounter we're going to have, obviously. There's going to be a few others. And I'd say that because you end up in the middle of this one and it's super dark and you can't put your back to anything unless you get back to the stairs, I'd say the next one's probably the toughest. But when you know what you're doing, none of them are really that bad. And so we're just going to do a little bit of collecting here, and there'll be a couple of small enemy encounters, and then we're going to be making our way down into the crypt, where it's going to be like a freezer area where they take all the Unitologists that have sacrificed themselves, or, any part of the church members that are deceased or have been sacrificed, and they go and donate their bodies to the church, and they store all the bodies down in this freezer. And, they wait for, the marker to happen, and, everyone gets reanimated, and so the corpses end up reanimating and breaking free. And that's more than likely how the church got completely overwhelmed. I mean, I wouldn't put it past those freaks to let them in anyway, but, if you ever needed to figure out how the church, for how secure it is, got overwhelmed and overrun, well, it's not just ritualistic sacrifice and their corpses were reanimated. No, it's something a bit more sinister than that. And considering how there are children that wander around, in the next chapter you're going to see us get attacked by children, it implies that there are also children as part of the church. Excuse me, throat's getting a bit dry. And I think it's quite sad. There's a story of Dead Space, like in a novel, that talks about Michael Altman, who's supposed to be the original founder of the Church of Unitology. I already knew about the book, and I actually tried to order on Amazon, but I never got it delivered. And like a whole year passed before I got like a notice saying like, oh, we couldn't deliver it. And I completely forgotten because it took that long to get it to me, but I didn't end up getting it, which was a real shame. But, it's a really fascinating read because, it basically brings to light that the black marker on Earth was put there on purpose to help like incentivize greed in human beings, which I think it's kind of BS. I think it's always just part of who we are. That's what I mean here too. These little suckers will latch on to the other necromorphs and strengthen their limbs so they can't be broken so easily. So it's taking quite a few shots at them. So you pick off their blades and try to hit them. Try to pick up whatever you can off of the counter and just throw it at the little guys. Because even though you can swing around and knock them off, if they're on you doing damage for enough time, then they will kill you. And you can't heal when they do this. So I almost got myself killed then. Very stupid. Don't do what I just did. And that's why I started shooting them, because I panicked. Yeah, take that. Read. But yeah. The black marker was put there like long ago, and I think like the cosmic horror aspect of Dead Space is really fascinating. I always have found it fascinating. Maybe I'll talk about that a bit more in some future parts when there's nothing really going on. But yeah, the idea that Michael like made contact with the black marker and understood what it was doing and saw like how the first necromorphs like on Earth were being made and how it was all happening, and he tried to stop it because he's like, no, this is crazy, they're crazy, we shouldn't be doing this, it's wrong, this is a trap. We're all being controlled, we're being puppets. And he got assassinated by EarthGov to try and cover up the secrets. And what ended up happening was everyone else decided to follow it like a religion, and they turned it into a movement. And it broke out and became pretty prominent in the galaxy. Just a really sad state of affairs. He tried to warn everyone what was going to happen, and they just didn't listen.